My name is Elena Morales. I'm 26 years old, but sometimes it feels like I'm stuck somewhere between the past and the future, a place where time drags and memories burn brighter than any hope. My parents used to whisper behind my back, their voices like distant thunder in a storm I could never outrun. "She'll never amount to anything." That's what they said, over and over, as if the words could shape my fate. I never argued. I never fought back, because deep down I believed them, until everything changed. The fire. It started one ordinary night, or maybe it wasn't ordinary at all. The headlines screamed my name like it was some kind of twisted victory. But victory felt hollow. Painful. They said it was an accident. I'm not sure I ever believed that. In the days after, when the smoke settled and the flashing lights disappeared, I sat alone in what was left, in the shadows of a life that burned down to ashes. It was in that silence I heard the whispers again. But this time, they weren't from my parents. They were from inside me. Let go. Move on. Heal. But how do you heal when the past clings to your skin like smoke? When love and pain are tangled so tightly, you don't know where one ends and the other begins. I want to move forward. I want to breathe again. But every night, the memories pull me back. His voice, his touch, the way he promised forever and then disappeared like a ghost in the flames. This story isn't just about the fire or the headlines. It's about the pieces of me scattered in that smoke, about heartbreak that doesn't fade, and about the dangerous edges of holding on too tight, to love, to hope, and to pain. I don't know where this path will take me, but this is my story. And maybe, if you listen close enough, you'll hear the echoes between the ashes. The nights were the hardest. When everything went quiet, the silence screamed louder than any siren or shouting crowd. I kept replaying the moments before the fire, like a broken record I couldn't stop. His last words, the way his eyes flickered with something I couldn't understand, the look he gave me when he left that night. He was supposed to be my forever, but forever turned into ashes. I still don't know what really happened. They told me it was a careless mistake, a candle left burning, a faulty wire, but something about it didn't add up. Why did I feel like someone else was there? Someone watching, waiting. And why did the fire seem almost intentional? My heart ached with the questions I was too scared to ask aloud. The man I loved, the life I built, the home I dreamed of, all gone in the blink of an eye. The weight of his absence pressed down on me every second. Sometimes I wanted to scream at the sky, beg for answers, for closure, but all I could do was sit in the cold ashes of what was left. Healing felt impossible. Every smile I forced, every step I took forward, was shadowed by the memory of him, by the love I wasn't ready to give up, no matter how much it tore me apart. My friends said I should move on. They didn't understand. How do you let go of someone who is your whole world, even when that world burned to the ground? But I had to try, because if I didn't, I'd be lost in those ashes forever. Still, the fire left more than scars on my skin. It left questions, secrets, and a darkness I couldn't shake. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Sometimes, the past shows up when you least expect it, in a whisper, a glance, a shadow just beyond sight. I thought the fire had burned it all away. The pain, the memories, the man I thought I'd never lose. But grief has a way of twisting time, of holding you captive in moments you can't escape. A few nights after the funeral, as I sat alone in the empty apartment that still smelled faintly of smoke and forgotten dreams, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I hesitated, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The rational part of me wanted to ignore it, to bury myself deeper in silence. But something, a flicker of hope, or maybe fear, made me answer. "Hello," I whispered, voice barely steady. "Elena," came a voice I hadn't heard in years. Soft, hesitant, familiar. It was Daniel. He used to be my best friend before everything went wrong. Before the fire. Before the man I loved became someone I barely recognized. "Daniel?" I breathed, the sound catching in my throat. I know this is sudden. I've been trying to find you. There are things you need to know. About that night. My blood ran cold. What could he possibly mean? What secrets had been buried in the flames? My fingers trembled as I clutched the phone tighter. The fragile hope of answers, of truth, and maybe even closure, flickered like a dying candle inside me. But with every flicker came the fear. What if some truths are better left in the dark? I stared at the phone long after the call ended, Daniel's words echoing in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. There are things you need to know about that night. What could he possibly know that I didn't? Memories I tried to bury bubbled up, small, cracked fragments I'd shoved into the back of my mind. The strange sound I heard just before the fire, the way his eyes darted nervously the night before, the phone call I never returned. But fear held me frozen. Because sometimes, knowing the truth hurts more than living with a lie. I wanted to heal. I wanted to let go. But the deeper I tried to bury the pain, the louder the memories screamed for attention. Why did he come back now, after all this time? Was Daniel really trying to help me? Or was he part of the fire's dark secret? That night, I couldn't sleep. The silence was thick, filled with questions that clawed at my chest. I reached for an old photograph, me and him, smiling, before everything fell apart. I traced his face with trembling fingers, feeling the weight of a love lost, of trust broken, and of a heart desperate to heal but trapped in its own pain. The fire had taken so much from me, but maybe it hadn't taken everything. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a spark left in the ashes. The next day, I couldn't focus. Every little sound felt amplified, the hum of the city, the rustle of leaves outside, even my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Daniel's call haunted me like a ghost I wasn't ready to face. I knew I had to see him. The weight of unanswered questions pressed down on me, heavier than any heartbreak. Maybe hearing what he had to say could finally unravel the tangled web of pain, love, and mystery. Or maybe it would only tighten the noose. When I met Daniel at the cafe we used to haunt years ago, everything felt both familiar and wrong. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but his eyes held the same earnestness. "Elena," he said quietly, "I never wanted to hurt you." I swallowed hard, the flood of old feelings crashing against the walls I'd built. Then why now? Why, after all this time? He hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "I found this while going through his things after the fire. It's something you need to see." My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. It was a note, cryptic but filled with names, dates, and places I didn't recognize. "Do you know what this means?" Daniel asked. I shook my head, heart pounding. "It's a map," he said, voice low, to the truth about what really happened that night. Suddenly, the fire didn't feel like an accident anymore. The line between love and betrayal blurred, and I realized that letting go wasn't as simple as I hoped. Because some memories, some secrets, refused to die quietly. The note felt heavy in my hands, like a weight tied to every broken promise and whispered secret. Daniel's eyes searched mine, hoping for something, trust, maybe forgiveness, or a sign that I was ready to face the darkness. I wasn't sure if I was ready. The names and places scribbled on the paper were unfamiliar, but something about the handwriting sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just a map. It was a trail leading straight into the heart of the mystery. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because I was scared. Scared of what it might mean. Scared of losing you forever." His words stabbed at the part of me that still held on to love and pain, tangled together so tightly I couldn't tell them apart. "I want to heal," I confessed, "but how do you heal when the person you trusted the most might be hiding the truth?" Daniel reached out, but I pulled away, the distance between us suddenly feeling like a chasm. Maybe healing means facing the truth, no matter how painful it is. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the fire wasn't the end of our story, that there was still hope in the ashes. But as the afternoon light faded, I realized the hardest part wasn't letting go of the past. It was deciding who to trust in the present. And in this story, trust might be the most dangerous flame of all. That night, sleep was a stranger. Shadows danced on the walls of my room, twisting into shapes I didn't want to face. Daniel's words echoed endlessly in my mind. A map to the truth. What truth? And at what cost? I pulled the note from my jacket again, studying the names and dates like a puzzle I had to solve. Among the cryptic scribbles, one name stood out: Marissa. Marissa. She was his sister, or at least that's what I thought. I hadn't seen her since before everything fell apart. The last time, she had warned me to stay away, but I never understood why. Suddenly, the pieces of the past started shifting, as if the ground beneath me was cracking open. Why had Marissa disappeared that night? Why was she nowhere to be found after the fire? I tried calling her, but the line went straight to voicemail. The silence was deafening. The next day, I visited the small apartment where she used to live. The landlord said she'd left abruptly. No forwarding address, no explanation. It felt like chasing a ghost. But I knew one thing. If I wanted to heal, I couldn't keep running from the past, no matter how broken or dangerous it was. Holding on to memories, love, and pain wasn't just my prison. It was the key. And I was ready to unlock the door, even if what waited on the other side was darkness. The absence of Marissa's voice on the phone was a hollow ache that settled deep in my chest. She was a missing piece, a shadow I had to chase, even if it meant walking into the dark. Days passed as I pieced together fragments, whispers from neighbors, forgotten letters, and Daniel's hesitant answers. Everyone seemed afraid to speak about that night, as if the fire had burned more than just a house. One evening, I found myself standing in front of an old bookstore Marissa used to love. The faded sign swung gently in the wind, creaking like a ghost's sigh. I pushed the door open. The smell of aged paper and dust wrapped around me like a fragile memory. Behind the counter stood a woman with sharp eyes, older, but with the same striking features I remembered from Marissa's photos. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice cautious. "I'm looking for Marissa," I said, heart pounding. The woman's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You're not the first to ask. She's been gone a long time. Do you know where she is? Or what happened to her?" The woman hesitated, then leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "Marissa was tangled in things far darker than you realize. Things that don't stay buried easily. If you want to find her, or the truth, be careful. Some flames burn too hot to touch." My hands trembled. The fire was more than an accident. And now, the path to healing twisted through shadows I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The warning lingered in my mind like a pulse. Some flames burn too hot to touch. I wanted to run, to turn away from the dark corners of the past. But the ache inside me wouldn't let me. Marissa's disappearance was more than just a mystery. It was a door to everything I'd been running from. The love I lost, the lies I'd been told, and the pain I couldn't stop holding on to. I found myself wandering the streets late at night, retracing memories and whispers, searching for any sign of her, or the truth. The city felt colder, emptier somehow, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to uncover secrets it desperately wanted to keep hidden. Then, one rainy evening, a stranger appeared, a man with tired eyes and a face I didn't recognize, but who seemed to know me. "Elena," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken stories. "Who are you?" I asked, heart hammering. He hesitated, then pulled a crumpled photograph from his pocket. It was Marissa. "But why now?" I whispered. The man's gaze darkened. "Because some shadows never fade. And the fire, it's not over." The rain soaked through my coat, but I barely noticed. My eyes were locked on the photograph, Marissa's face staring back at me, untouched by time. "Who are you?" I asked again, voice trembling. The man looked away for a moment, then back with tired eyes that held a storm of regret. "My name's Gabriel. I knew Marissa better than anyone." His words sent a chill down my spine. "What happened to her? Where is she?" Gabriel swallowed hard, the weight of his silence heavier than the rain around us. "She's alive," he finally said, voice low. "But hiding. Because the fire was no accident. And whoever's behind it, they're still watching." A surge of fear and hope crashed inside me, tangled, impossible to separate. Why didn't she come to me? Because she's protecting you. And herself. Some wounds are too dangerous to reopen. Tears burned my eyes, memories flooding back, the love lost, the pain buried, the endless nights spent trying to heal. Then what do I do now? Gabriel's gaze was steady, fierce. Find her. Find the truth. And maybe, finally, find a way to let go. The path ahead was uncertain, shadowed with danger and pain. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark, fragile but real. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about facing the fire and walking through the flames. The rain had stopped, but the cold lingered, not just on my skin, but deep inside my chest. Gabriel's words echoed as I stood alone on the empty street, the photograph folded carefully in my hand. Find her. Find the truth. And maybe, finally, find a way to let go. For years, I'd clung to memories, to love, to pain, to a past that refused to die. But now I had a choice. I could stay trapped in the ashes, or I could step into the fire and face whatever truth awaited me. I thought of Daniel, his hesitations and secrets, and the tangled web of lies I was already caught in. Could I trust Gabriel? Could I trust anyone anymore? I didn't have the answers. But one thing was clear. Healing wouldn't come from forgetting. It would come from facing the shadows, no matter how dark or dangerous. That night, I packed a small bag and left a note on the kitchen table. I'm sorry I couldn't stay, but I have to know the truth for myself, for him, for us all. With each step away from the life I knew, I felt the sting of loss, but also the faintest flicker of hope. Maybe the fire that nearly destroyed me could also be the spark that saved me. The road ahead was uncertain, stretched thin like a thread between my past and whatever future awaited. I left the city behind. The memories, the smoke, the whispers of a life half-burned. Every mile I drove, I felt the weight of the past pressing down, but also a strange lightness, as if shedding the familiar chains could bring me closer to something real. Gabriel had given me a name, a place where Marissa might be hiding, but no promises, only shadows and half-truths. The landscape shifted around me. Empty highways, small towns with peeling paint and secrets of their own. At night, the silence was loud. I fought to hold on to hope, but the pain, the love, the betrayal, the memories, they clung to me like smoke, impossible to shake. Each time I thought I was moving forward, I found myself reaching back, clutching the past like a lifeline. Because letting go wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 small breaks, 1,000 tiny deaths, 1,000 flickers in the dark. And I was still burning. The small town was quiet, almost too quiet, like the kind of place where secrets sleep behind closed doors and the past isn't ready to be spoken aloud. I found myself standing before a weathered house at the edge of town, the address Gabriel gave me. The windows were shuttered, and the garden was wild with neglect, but something about it felt alive, like the heartbeat of a story waiting to be told. I knocked. The door creaked open, just a crack, and a voice, soft but wary, asked, "Who is it?" "My name is Elena. I'm looking for Marissa." A long silence. Then the door opened wider, revealing a woman with eyes that held both sorrow and fire. "Come in," she said. Inside, the air was thick with unspoken words. "I don't know what you want from her," the woman said quietly, "but Marissa's past is tangled in flames, and some wounds don't heal with time." Tears pricked my eyes. Neither do I. And in that moment, I realized the journey wasn't just about finding Marissa. It was about finding myself, in the smoke, the pain, and the fragile hope that maybe, one day, I could finally let go. The woman's name was Lila, Marissa's closest friend, and perhaps her only guardian in this shadowed world. She didn't offer easy answers, only quiet truths wrapped in half-spoken warnings. Marissa disappeared because she had to. There were people, dangerous people. The fire wasn't just destruction. It was a warning. A warning. The word echoed in my mind like a drumbeat, pulling me deeper into a past I was only beginning to understand. Why didn't she tell me? I whispered, the ache inside me raw and unbearable. Because she was protecting you, Lila said softly. But protecting her secret meant losing herself. And maybe losing you too. I wanted to scream at the unfairness, at the love tangled in lies, at the pain that wouldn't let me go. But all I could do was sit with the silence, letting the weight of it settle over me like ash. Healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about standing in the fire, facing the flames inside, no matter how much they burned. And in that fire, maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to be whole again. Days blurred into nights as I sat with Lila, piecing together shards of a story I barely recognized, a story tangled in betrayal, fear, and the desperate fight to survive. Marissa wasn't just hiding from the past. She was running from people who didn't want the truth to come out. The fire, Lila said softly, was meant to erase everything. But some flames leave marks deeper than skin. I thought about him, the man I loved, the man who vanished into the smoke. Was he part of this? Had I been holding on to memories built on lies? The pain of that thought cut sharper than any wound. But the ache inside me was also a strange kind of hope. Hope that if I could unravel the truth, I could finally start to heal. Yet healing felt like staring into a fractured mirror, every piece reflecting a different, painful truth. Could I face all of them? Could I let go of the love and the pain tangled so tightly inside me? Or was I destined to carry these scars forever? A reminder that some fires never truly die. The more I learned, the more fragile everything felt, like walking on glass shards hidden beneath layers of ash. Lila's words haunted me. Some flames leave marks deeper than skin. I thought of the man I loved, the one whose promises were swallowed by smoke and silence. Was he a victim or a villain? A truth I wasn't sure I wanted to face. Gabriel had warned me about trust, but I had no choice but to lean on the fragile threads connecting me to the people who knew the story shadows. One night, as the city slept, a message blinked on my phone, no name, just a single line. Stop looking. Some fires are meant to burn. Fear and defiance warred inside me. Was this a warning or a threat? Either way, it was clear. The past wasn't done with me yet. And maybe neither was the fire. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat of old wounds and the faint glow of something new, determination. If healing meant walking through the flames, then I was ready to burn. The anonymous message haunted me like a cold shadow. Stop looking. Some fires are meant to burn. But how could I stop when every heartbeat screamed for answers? Trust had become a fragile, fractured thing, and every step I took felt like walking blindfolded on a tightrope stretched over an abyss. Daniel's face flickered in my mind, his hesitant truths and the secrets he held. Gabriel's guarded warnings. Lila's sorrowful eyes.
Who was protecting me?
Who was hiding pieces of the fire's dark puzzle. I found myself back at the ruins of what used to be my home, the place where love turned to ash. In the silence, I heard a whisper, a voice I thought I'd forgotten. It wasn't just the fire that had burned me. It was betrayal. And some flames don't just consume the past, they ignite the present. The ruins of my old home were still smoldering in my mind, the echoes of loss and betrayal burning brighter than ever. I stood there, fingers tracing the charred edges of memories that refused to fade. Then, from the shadows, a voice broke through the silence, hesitant, urgent. Elena. I turned. It was Daniel. His eyes held something I wasn't prepared for, guilt, fear, and a truth he'd been carrying alone. I never wanted you to find out this way, he whispered, voice trembling. What are you talking about? He took a shaky breath. The fire, it wasn't an accident. And it wasn't just someone else's secret anymore. My heart pounded, every piece of pain, love, and confusion swirling inside me. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing you forever. But the truth, it's worse than you think. In that moment, I realized healing wouldn't come from forgetting or even forgiveness. It would come from facing the flames of truth, no matter how much they burned. Daniel's words hung in the air between us, heavy and raw. It wasn't an accident, he repeated, eyes pleading. There was someone else, someone who wanted to destroy everything. They wanted to hurt you through me. A cold wave washed over me, the fragile hope I'd clung to cracking beneath the weight of his confession. Why didn't you tell me? My voice broke, the pain surfacing like a wound reopened. Because I was scared. Scared you'd hate me. Scared it would put you in danger. Tears blurred my vision. Love, betrayal, fear, all tangled together in a messy knot I didn't know how to undo. I've been holding on to memories and pain for so long, I whispered. Trying to heal, but I keep falling back into the fire. Daniel reached out, hesitating. Maybe healing means facing the fire together, not alone. For the first time, the pain felt less like a prison and more like a fragile bridge, a chance to cross from heartbreak toward hope. But the shadows of the past were still there, waiting to see if I'd be strong enough to walk through the flames. Daniel's words lingered in the cold night air, wrapping around me like a fragile promise or a dangerous gamble. Facing the fire together. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that amidst the wreckage of love and betrayal, there could be healing. But the past wasn't done with me yet. There were still questions, dark, whispered questions, that clawed at the edges of my mind. Who had wanted to burn us down?
And why?
As the city lights flickered behind us, I realized the road ahead was no longer just about memory or pain. It was about survival, about trust, fragile, flickering, but maybe enough to guide me through the smoke. I looked at Daniel, at the man who had held my heart and broken it, yet still stood beside me in the shadows. Let's find the truth, I whispered. And as we stepped into the unknown, I knew one thing for certain. Healing wasn't a destination. It was the courage to keep moving, even when everything inside you wanted to burn down. The morning light felt fragile, like the hope I was trying to hold on to. Daniel and I sat across from each other, a map spread between us, the one from the note Marissa left behind. Each marked location was a thread, weaving a story of secrets and betrayal that stretched far beyond the fire. We're chasing ghosts, Daniel murmured, but his eyes held determination. I nodded, feeling the weight of every memory and every pain that had brought me here. Maybe some ghosts need to be faced, I replied, voice steady despite the storm inside. As we planned our first stop, I couldn't ignore the knot of fear twisting in my gut. Who was watching us? Who wanted? To keep this buried? And how much more of my heart could I risk breaking, chasing a truth that might burn everything to ashes? But I knew this was the only way forward. Because healing wasn't about forgetting the fire. It was about walking through its embers, together. We left before dawn, the sky still heavy with stars and secrets. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. Every mile felt like crossing a threshold, leaving behind the fragile safety of memory and stepping into the unknown. Daniel drove quietly, his eyes flicking to me with a mix of hope and regret. I'm sorry for everything, he said softly. For the lies, for the silence. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I want to believe you. I want to heal. But healing isn't easy, he warned. Sometimes it means facing things we never wanted to see. Our first stop was a small, rundown motel on the outskirts of a forgotten town, one of the places marked on Marissa's map. The receptionist's guarded eyes followed us as we asked questions. It was clear we weren't the first to come looking, and not everyone wanted the past to be uncovered. That night, as I lay awake in the dim room, memories clawed at me. Love, pain, betrayal, tangled so tightly I didn't know where one ended and the other began. And somewhere outside, the shadows waited, whispering that the fire was far from over. The motel room was cold and unfamiliar, but sleep wouldn't come. The past clawed at the edges of my mind. Memories of laughter turned to silence, love twisted by lies, and the fire that had burned everything away. Daniel was asleep beside me, but the space between us felt vast, filled with the unspoken fears and fragile hopes we both carried. The next morning, we visited the next mark on Marissa's map, a rundown cafe where she'd been seen last before disappearing. The owner was reluctant, his eyes darting nervously whenever I asked about Marissa. She was trouble, he muttered, voice low. got mixed up with people who don't forgive easily. Every word felt like a shard of glass, cutting through the fragile walls I'd built around my heart. But beneath the fear, a stubborn flame of determination burned. I wasn't ready to give up, not on Marissa, not on the truth, and not on myself. Because healing was messy and painful, a journey through shadows and light, love and loss. And maybe, just maybe, it was a journey worth taking. The cafe's stale air seemed to hold every secret it had ever swallowed, and the owner's words echoed like a warning. She got mixed up with people who don't forgive easily. I swallowed hard, feeling the old ache twist inside me. The ache of a love burned by betrayal, the ache of memories that refused to fade. Daniel's hand found mine, a quiet anchor in the storm of emotions swirling around us. "We're closer," he said softly. "Closer than we've been in a long time." But the closer we got to the truth, the heavier the shadows seemed to grow. That night, as I lay in the dark, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging. Some fires leave scars that never heal." I stared at the screen, torn between fear and defiance. Could I finally let go? Or was I destined to keep holding on to the memories, the love, and the pain until they consumed me? The fire had taken so much. But maybe, just maybe, it hadn't taken everything. And the truth was waiting, flickering, fragile, just beyond the flames. The warning burned in my mind. Some fires leave scars that never heal. But standing at the edge of everything I thought I knew, I realized healing wasn't about erasing scars. It was about embracing them, letting them tell my story, raw and true. Daniel and I faced the truth together that night, in a quiet room far from the ruins and whispers. The full story spilled out, betrayals, sacrifices, and secrets darker than I ever imagined. Marissa's disappearance, the fire's real cause, and the people who wanted it all to stay buried. Pain mingled with relief, love tangled with heartbreak. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt a fragile hope, a spark flickering in the ashes. Maybe healing wasn't about letting go completely. Maybe it was about holding on to the love, the pain, the memories, and finding the courage to keep moving forward anyway. And as I stepped out into the cold night air, I knew one thing for sure. The fire might have burned me, but it didn't define me. I was still here, still breathing, still fighting. And that was enough. The truth had settled between us like a fragile bridge, something delicate but necessary to cross. I could feel the weight of everything, love, betrayal, loss, pressing down, but also a strange lightness beneath it all, as if the fire had cleared space inside me. But healing wasn't a straight line. Some nights, memories came rushing back like smoke, choking me with their sharp edges. Daniel's presence was both a comfort and a reminder of the fragile trust we were, still trying to rebuild. And just when I thought I could finally breathe, a new shadow appeared. A letter slipped under my door and signed with a single line. "Not everything burns away. Some embers wait to ignite." The past wasn't done with me, and neither was the mystery. Yet, in the midst of the uncertainty, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, a flicker of hope. Maybe healing meant holding on to the pain, the love, and the memories, not as chains, but as the embers lighting my way forward. And I was ready to follow that light, wherever it might lead. The anonymous letter was like a cold breath on my neck, a reminder that the past wasn't done whispering its secrets. I sat alone in the quiet of my apartment, the words swirling in my mind. Not everything burns away. Some embers wait to ignite. Daniel's absence felt heavier than ever, but I knew I couldn't face this alone. The memories, the love, the pain, they tangled inside me, a bittersweet storm I was still learning to navigate. That night, I reached out to Lila, hoping for answers, or at least a flicker of light in the darkness. Her voice trembled on the other end, carrying the weight of warnings and fear. "Elena, you're stirring something. Something dangerous." But I was done running. Maybe healing wasn't about burying the past or forgetting the pain. Maybe it was about standing in the flames, even when they threatened to consume everything I held dear. And with that, I made a choice to follow the embers, no matter where they led, even if the flame was waiting to roar back to life. The call with Lila left a chill lingering long after we hung up. Her words, "You're stirring something, something dangerous," echoed in my mind like a warning shot across the bow. But I was past the point of turning back. The embers inside me had begun to glow brighter, pulling me closer to truths I'd tried to forget. Daniel's absence was a hollow ache, but it gave me space to breathe and to think. I pored over the clues again. The map, the cryptic notes, the shadows behind familiar faces. Who was watching us? Who wanted the past to stay buried? Late that night, I found myself walking the streets alone, the city's quiet hum wrapping around me like a cloak. Every step felt like a dance with shadows, with memories of love and pain, of trust and betrayal. And in the distance, a faint flicker of light beckoned, fragile, but impossible to ignore. Maybe healing wasn't about escaping the darkness. Maybe it was about learning to dance with it. The flicker of light I followed that night led me to a forgotten part of town, where broken windows and peeling paint whispered stories I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. Inside, the air was thick with dust and secrets. A figure emerged from the shadows, familiar, yet changed by time and silence. "Why are you here?" The voice was cautious, almost afraid. "Because I need answers," I said, trying to steady my trembling hands and heart. The truth was a fragile thing, tangled in love, loss, and the fire that refused to die. As the walls closed in, I realized healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about facing the darkness beneath the surface and finding the courage to keep going, even when every step hurt. The figure stepped closer, their face emerging from the darkness. Someone I thought I'd lost forever. "Why are you here, Elena?" The voice trembled, laced with pain and regret. I swallowed hard, the weight of memories crashing down like a tidal wave. "I'm here for the truth," I said, voice steady despite the storm inside me. They nodded slowly, eyes flickering with sorrow. The fire wasn't just destruction. It was a choice. And the choices we made, they haunt us all. The air felt heavy, thick with secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. I felt the fragile thread of hope inside me fray and snap, but also, somewhere beneath the rubble, a flicker of something stronger. Maybe healing wasn't about escaping the shadows. Maybe it was about carrying their weight and finding light despite it all. The room felt suffocating, thick with unspoken regrets and the weight of secrets too heavy to bear. "I never wanted this to happen," the figure said, voice cracking. But once the fire started, there was no turning back. I looked at them, a reflection of my own brokenness, and felt the raw ache of love and betrayal intertwine. "Why didn't you come to me?" I whispered. "Because I thought I was protecting you," they said, eyes haunted. But in the end, I only made everything worse. The truth wasn't clean or simple. It was a tangled web of mistakes, pain, and desperate choices, all burning beneath the surface, waiting to be faced. And as much as I wanted to let go, part of me was still holding on to the memories, the love, the pain. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting. Maybe it was about carrying the burden of truth and finding strength in the cracks. I left the building with the weight of that conversation still, pressing on my chest. The city around me felt surreal, like I was walking through smoke no one else could see. The truth I'd been given wasn't clean. It wasn't the kind that healed. It only raised more questions, the kind that gnawed at you in the quietest hours. Was Marissa really running from someone or something deeper? Was Daniel's guilt only about the fire or about what came before it? I tried to make sense of it all, but every time I reached for clarity, my fingers found only ash. That night, I went through old voicemail recordings I hadn't been able to delete. Most were simple, reminders, affection, silence filled with breath and safety. But the last one, it was Marissa's voice, whispering.
Rushed. Panicked.
"They know. Elena, they know. Don't trust what you see. Not even him." The recording cut out, and my blood ran cold. Not even him. My mind reeled. Daniel? Gabriel? The man I had just spoken to? I realized then this wasn't just about healing. It wasn't just about grief or letting go. This was about survival. And somewhere in the middle of love, pain, and everything I'd lost, someone was still playing with fire. The message from Marissa had shattered what little piece I had built. I listened to it again. And again. They know. Elena, they know. Don't trust what you see. Not even him. The warning echoed through my mind as I stood in the doorway of the last place on Marissa's map, an old cabin deep in the woods, where silence wrapped the trees like a veil. Inside, I found her.
Alive. Changed.
Fragile and fierce all at once. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw me. Elena, she whispered. You came. The reunion was painful, beautiful, shattered and whole. She told me everything. The fire was intentional, not just to silence her, but to erase what she knew. The people involved weren't strangers. Gabriel had tried to help her escape. Daniel had known. Not started it, but watched it unfold. He'd been compromised, and he'd stayed quiet. He said he loved me. Maybe he did. But love, I had learned, was not always a shield. Sometimes it was the match. I left Daniel behind without a word. That was the final letting go. Not the forgetting, not the forgiving, but the choosing. I chose me. I chose the scars. I chose the truth. Marissa and I disappeared after that. Together. We didn't run, not really. We simply stepped away from the smoke and into something new. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. In silent mornings. In shared grief. In laughter that didn't feel guilty anymore. The fire may have made the headlines. But what mattered most? I didn't burn down with it. I became something stronger in the ash.
The end.